Hi, I'm just back from a week in London. I've been back probably a couple of days now. And I just wanted to reflect on the experiences I had over the last week taking action with Just Stop Oil. Down in our capital, it was a very hard week, but we don't feel like we have any choice now, given what's happening in the world. We've got a straightforward demand. We want the government to stop all new oil, gas and coal exploration, the licensing of it, the production of it, anything new. We've got enough reserves. We know we've got enough reserves to allow for a just transition. They're just not listening. In fact, they're lying to us constantly. In fact, they're going back on their promises. So I was down in London. I spent the week with people from the east of England, supporters of Just Stop Oil. We were down taking acts of civil resistance because nothing else works. I was talking to a friend earlier. She spent the last 30 years trying to get action on the climate crisis. She's been to the early COPs. She's written petitions, she's talked to MPs, letters, written to newspapers. None of that has worked. But we know civil resistance works. And unfortunately, that's the only thing we've got left in the timescales available. We claim we live in like a democracy, but really, do we? I think we're the only other country in Europe is Belarus that doesn't have proportional representation. And we can clearly see that our government aren't doing enough. So yes, we were down. We caused disruption in London last week. We did slow marching around the capital in various places from Parliament Square all the way out to the boroughs. It's not easy doing that, and we hate disrupting the public, but we always say, look, we'll stop the disruption as soon as the government makes a meaningful statement on stopping new oil and gas, which we know is killing people right now. And you sort of have to look at what we're up against as well. You've got these billionaire media moguls, the fossil fuel industry with massive pockets. You've got the government that refuse to listen to the science. You've got industry lobbyists who are funded by these billionaires. And you've got these right-wing think tanks that seem to be in a complete state of denial or constantly looking after their own vested interests, putting profit before people, before planet. We just don't have that sort of money, I'm afraid. If we could spend £1 billion tomorrow on education, that would be brilliant, but we don't have that money to really blow the lid off the denial, blow the lid off the lies that the government are perpetuating. But we don't have that. We only have civil resistance available to us, and that's what we're engaged in. Because we know it works. There's been a long history of it, from Martin Luther King to Gandhi, to the suffragettes, if you like, to the LGBTQ plus movement. All these people have engaged in civil resistance to get the rights that we have today, and that we take for granted today, whether that be holidays or maternity pay or weekends. They all came by through civil resistance. And we're following in that proud tradition, if you like, to try and bring about changes. Perhaps the biggest crisis of all, the climate crisis, that's an existential threat to us all. Okay, just stepped outside to get some fresh air. Yeah, where was I? Okay, yeah, so I was down in London last week, taking action with Just Stop Oil, as I was saying. Civil resistance against our, frankly, criminal government. And yeah, we did cause disruption. We blocked people in their cars. They were delayed to getting to work, maybe to appointments. But by the way, we do always let ambulances through. We have a blue light policy, so any sort of emergency vehicle that comes along with blue lights flashing, we'll let through. It doesn't mean that people don't get pissed off. It doesn't mean that people are obviously very angry with us. We get abuse thrown at us all the time. And I was just thinking about that earlier, about we have such a wide variety of people with us taking action with Just Stop Oil. People from their teens, 18 plus, all the way into their 70s and 80s and even early 90s. We're all come together as a community because we all care. We care passionately about what's happening to the world. I mean, I've got niece and nephew who are 9 and 11. Got godchildren that are young. My friends' children are all very young. I think one of my biggest fears is that they're not going to grow up to be the same age as me in the world that's appearing before us. I mean, you look at what's happening in roads at the moment in Greece, the fires raging across the landscape in Corfu. You look at what happened in Pakistan last year with 33 million people displaced through flooding. You look at what's happening in Africa, where literally one person's dying every 36 seconds because of climate-induced famine and drought. There's millions of people are dying. We'll have 1 billion people displaced by 2050 if we carry on. I mean, we worry about the climate crisis and the migration crisis now. You know, the few thousand people that are crossing the channel in boats, or the people drowning in the Mediterranean. How much worse is it going to get? We're going to see mass migration out of Africa, out of Asia, towards places that are still habitable when those niches become uninhabitable. It's just going to be too hot to live, as we're seeing in places like India now and in Africa. So I was taking action with all those people down in London, those young people, and it really upsets me to see those young people out on the streets taking it. Well, it inspires me, but it also upsets me. I think about, oh God, you know, they're getting arrested, they're getting carted off by the police, they're suffering horrendous abuse from some members of the public, they're getting put in prison cells, all for caring. And I sort of think to myself, well, what's their future going to be like if they keep doing this? They're not going to be able to get a job, they're not going to be able to get insurance, simple things like that. But then they turn around and they say, look, what's the point in having a job if there's not going to be a livable planet to live on? Sorry, it's really upsetting, but I have to say, it's true, isn't it? I mean, if they're not going to have somewhere to live in 10 years, 20 years time, you sort of want to put all your effort into actually averting the crisis we're in. And I'm not sure we can avert it. We're at 1.1, is it 1.2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial averages now. That's only going to get worse. Climate scientists recently have been saying the 1.5 degree target is bust. You know, these were commitments that were made in the Paris Agreement, and yet the government still wants to invest in new oil and gas. And don't give me that bloody China argument. Don't say, I'll go to China and protest. That's just banal and ridiculous. You look at the way our carbon emissions are accounted for. Again, it's based on lies, a web of lies. They don't take into account goods that are produced overseas, or aviation, or shipping. And China, they're investing far more in renewables than we are. I think we opened like 2 new onshore wind farms last year. Ukraine built more wind farms than that, and they're at war. And don't talk to me about energy security either. That's just, again, the fossil fuel industry trying to profit and hang on to their stranded assets. North Sea oil and gas, these new projects that the government want to open, won't do anything for our energy security, because the companies that own the rights to those will sell that to the highest bidder, which won't be the UK, or probably won't be the UK. So that oil and gas will get exported abroad. We need to invest in renewables now. Yeah, so I'm just thinking about all the people that have been arrested, that are in jail now, like Morgan and Marcus. They're in jail now. They were sentenced to up to 3 years for taking action. I mean, what are future generations going to think exactly of what we've been doing? Okay, let's try and finish this off. So, actually, it's worth saying that once we were down in London, as well as all the negative things you see in the press, what you don't see is all the support we get from the side of the road, and even from a lot of drivers, including ambulance drivers. We had that, and cyclists galore. They're all so supportive. They've stopped, they cheer us on, they ask us to keep going. So there's immense amounts of support out there, but you just don't hear it. And, you know, we know that the majority of people support our demand for no new oil and gas. We know that all the political parties, apart from the Tories, all the major political parties, apart from the Tories, support that demand for no new oil and gas. Because that's what the UN is saying. That's what the government's own climate change committee is saying. That's what the International Energy Association is saying. They're all saying we can't afford new oil and gas. I don't know why people don't get it. It's not, we can't have an economy if we're dead, if we can't grow food, if our NHS isn't anything more, if our pensions are gone. All these things that we rely upon today, or this essential infrastructure, can't survive if it's one, overwhelmed by people migrating from places where they can't live anymore, but two, because there's not enough food to feed us, not enough water. Where I live in the in East Anglia, we had harvest failures last year, potatoes and sugar beets. It's only going to get worse, unfortunately. Poor farmers and water shortages is terrible. Not to mention, soil erosion, etc. And then you look at the rate the oceans are heating up as well. And the North Atlantic has seen a heat wave with fish dying in their sort of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. Anyway, yeah, so we know millions are dying now. We know the government wants to roll back on its green policies because it's not economically viable. I mean, what the hell? We know the UN are telling us that we're on the we're on the road to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. I mean, Antonio Guterres has said to himself that we have a short window of opportunity to secure a livable future. That was in the latest IPCC report. That's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There's no room for climate denialists anymore. It's proven. We know the science. Let's move on. So, I guess, what's next? Well, I know groups like Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, other pressure groups will continue to take action because that's what choice do we have? I quite like to live, actually, and I quite like my friends' children to live, my godchildren, my niece and nephew to have a future. I'd quite like the people that are suffering and dying right now in the global south to have a future. So Just Stop Oil are going to be working with lawyers to bring cases against climate criminals, those that are refusing to accept the truth and that continue to push for new oil and gas. They're basically pushing for profits over us. Squeeze the last drops of oil and gas out. I think BP and Shell have said that that's their aim. Their aim is to profit and survival. They want to survive as long as they can and make as much money as they can. It's disgusting. It's immoral. And some of the language we use is harsh, We're accusing these people of murdering people. It may not be their direct intent, but they know what's happening with the continued use of fossil fuels. It's pushing temperatures up, it's leading to extreme weather, it's leading to drought, to famine, etc. And by virtue of that, millions of people are dying. I just don't think people are getting it. Millions of people are dying, and we're at risk as well. This isn't just a movie on the television. Yeah, so we're working with lawyers to prosecute these people, these government ministers, these fossil fuel billionaires, these media moguls sitting in their ivory towers writing stories that are dividing the public opinion, the lies they spread, the lies they propagate just to secure their own financial background. It's the lobbyists, the think tanks, they're not on your side, they're not on our side. So we're going to prosecute them. We're going to work with lawyers to do that. There's other organisations like CGAN that are doing the same. Climate Genocide Act now. And genocide, that's what is happening. Low island nations are disappearing. The Solomon Islands have lost 5 small islands already. The Maldives are at risk. Vanuatu's at risk. Of course, places like India and Bangladesh are at risk from sea level rise as well. We're seeing floods in our own country. Genocide is a really strong term, but there's, I'm going to have to look at my notes here, but Article 30.2 in the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court talks about oblique intent. Now, I'm sure Rishi Sunak doesn't wake up and go, I'm going to kill lots of people by exploiting more oil and gas. But he knows his own climate change committee have told him what the effects will be. And that counts as oblique intent. And under that statute, Article 30.2 of the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court, they're prosecutable under that. So these people in positions of power really need to think about this. You continue to be on the side of big oil, then you're going to get prosecuted, potentially, especially by future generations who are going to look back and say, what were you thinking? Okay, final bit. It can all seem pretty hopeless sometimes. We take these actions, we get the abuse, we get arrested, thrown in jail. But the community we have in Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion and other organisations are amazing. I don't think I've made it through the last few years without these people. They're awake to what's happening. And once you're awake to what's happening, it's really hard. Well, sometimes I wish I wasn't awake to what's happening, actually. But anyway, what can you do to help? Well, you can donate to Just Stop Oil. If you can't take action directly, we always need money. We're going to need money for lawyers to prosecute these climate criminals. Or you can come and join us. Go to juststopoil.org and sign up on our website. Our current campaign of slow marching just finished, but there's going to continue to be actions. We're going to be looking at mobilising again later in the year to do more stuff. And from now on, there'll be things happening. I can only urge you to act with your conscience and do something about what's happening, because time has run out, really. It's certainly run out for those people in the global south that are suffering right now. And it's going to run out for all of us soon, unless we do something about it. I don't know who this quote is attributable to, but, and I'm not going to get it right, but the only way that evil, the only thing it takes for evil to win is for good people to stand by and do nothing. So please don't stand by and do nothing. Civil resistance is needed. Sign up at juststopoil.org. Thanks very much.